What inspired you to go into law?
Well, very good question. So, when I was in college, I studied economics, and my job that I got right out of college was working as a budget analyst for the state of Illinois up in Springfield. And it was actually doing that work that made me interested in law. One of my responsibilities as a budget analyst was analyzing fiscal impacts of new legislation and really like studying the new statutes and figuring out what they mean and how they change the old ones. And so that analysis of legislation turned me on to the idea of law school.
Fourth floor.
My first job out of law school was clerking for a judge, and then I worked for a couple of firms. One was general practice, doing a little bit of everything, then one that mostly represented companies, like huge financial institutions, and that made me realize that I prefer representing individuals. So then, since beginning of 2014, I've basically done family law only, and as a sole practitioner, I offer probably more competitive rates than other attorneys of comparable experience because my overhead is lower at this point. I had a family law case go all the way up to Missouri Supreme Court, which I won. That was a contested adoption case. So I believe that I have a lot of credentials that make me a strong candidate.
Now, when you take on a client for, say, like a divorce case, what kinds of things do you take into consideration when you take on such a client?
Well, I mean, divorces don't really have a win or a loss. There's basically 5, 6 things that can or can't be at issue in divorce. Division of property. If you have children, the custody of the children. The child support. Is there alimony? And I guess attorney's fees. I mean, those are pretty much the main things that are going to be at issue in any divorce. And in some of the divorces, a real quick and simple one, you're only married a few years, you're renting an apartment, you didn't buy a house together, you didn't have kids together, you both drive a car that you owned before the marriage. I mean, that's a pretty quick one. So you can go from one with no children, no property, you both have jobs, it's just basically, yeah, we're divorced now, or, one where everything's in play: children, property, alimony, child support, and even payment of attorney's fees in the case. So it can go from a sort of a 0-issue case to a 5, 6, 7-issue case.
Now, when you take on a, say, order of protection case, what is your top priority for you and your client when it comes to that?
For order of protection, I mean, it's obviously going to depend on whether they're the one seeking the order or defending against it, but in a case of defending against it, it's going to be, can we prove that these allegations are false? The other side, do you have recordings or writings or something to prove that they're true? Something other than your own testimony. But sometimes that's enough in an order of protection case. But unless, the person defending against it has evidence that, like, they weren't at the place when it happened, where the alleged happened, or they can show their work schedule. Hey, I wasn't at this person's house. It shows I was clocked in at work for these hours that day, or those sorts of things are going to come in handy defending against it. When you're arguing that one should be entered, then in large part it's the testimony of the petitioner, the alleged victim, that comes into play, and if the respondent or the alleged perpetrator can't really disprove it, then yeah, it's a matter of weighing the credibility of the parties. And I mean, basically, as long as the judge believes it's more likely than not that it happened, the judge being the one who weighs credibility, then yes, you can get an order of protection entered.
If someone going through a divorce or a child custody ordeal at this very moment is looking for someone to represent them and is wondering, why should I allow you to take on my case out of all these other attorneys out here, how would you respond to that?
Well, I would say this: it's better to be smart than to be right. You're going to want an attorney who has the credentials, has the experience in family law. 2, is it someone you connect with, you trust, you can relate to, you feel comfortable talking to. And then 3, choose your battles wisely. I can say what I have to offer. I have 15 years of experience out of law school. I've done almost exclusively family law for the past 5 and have some family law experience prior to that. I am a very strong writer and strong at quantitative skills. I think I'm good at developing strategy with terms of discovery, and I can be very thorough if the client wants me to be. I do divorce, child custody, orders of protection, adoption, custody modification, child support, and alimony modification. I think that's the way to look at it. And I mean, people who treat it as a battle are probably going to get hurt more than people who just treat it as we're splitting things up and the court says it's equitable, so let's try to make it equitable.